Friends, I'm so excited to have Kathy Kuo with us today. She comes from a really beautiful background, which is all about home, having a home where you can have both your eternal family and also the environment around you reflect your values. Kathy's upbringing actually started in Taiwan. She grew up there in Taipei and then moved to Boston, went to design school in Rhode Island. She was a senior designer at Bed Bath and Beyond. And then that helped her launch Kathy Kuo Home. And it's this beautiful interior design service that has this robust way of doing e-design, something I wish when I went through my crazy renovation to bring all the different elements together in a beautiful, elegant way. And hopefully you're checking out YouTube because Kathy, even behind her, has this space that looks like it's one of those Zoom backgrounds, but is actually real. So both elegant in her home, in her whole being. It's so great to have you here, Kathy, to share your story. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Analiza. I'm so lovely to see you again. And Happy New Year.
So, Kathy, let's talk about you and particularly your upbringing because it's rare to have someone, I think, in design and then start their business in entrepreneurship. Can you talk about how your identity, your upbringing helped shape your path and where you are today?
Yeah, thank you. So I grew up a little unconventionally. My father was a diplomat, and I grew up basically traveling all over the world as a child. And to be completely clear, did not have all the privileges of being a diplomatic, daughter. It wasn't like, we got out of parking tickets and everything. It was pretty much just I moved around all the time. And it was at a point where I joke around, I went to grade school, middle school, and high school, all in different countries and different schools. And I would come home from high school, I remember, and just all of my stuff would have already been moved. So I would come home and I'm like, where's all my stuff? And my parents would have already moved for me. And so it's like things like this, the things that I really held near and dear to me were the things that I would bring from home to home. And so this would be like a hammock, or it's the things inside the home, like a picture frame, a specific teddy bear, and these were the things that really resonated to me. And so ever since then, home meant to me like love, belonging, safety, nurturing, and consistency, really. And so it was always like, ever since I was a kid, I knew I was going to be an interior designer or at least doing something in home. So that's 100% the reason why.
Kathy, your love of home and the movement, I mean, that's pretty crazy to come home and then have all your stuff gone. As a surprise, that's very jolting as a kid and to have it
Well,
have
we have
multiple times.
children, and so we can imagine how crazy that sounds. And to have done it, like I would say, probably 8 or 9 times growing up.
Wow.
Um, Remembering going from absolute popularity to the doldrums of like having zero friends, right? Like the disparity of the two, speaking a language to completely not speaking a language to back to, forgetting what English again, and all of that, and how it shapes you in terms of like, oh my gosh, like I gotta like make friends. I've got to like learn the language. I have to figure out how to like not, get 0 points in math, and like all of that stuff I think has really, really shaped me to who I'm today, I would say.
So, Kathy, let's actually go there because having moved to so many different countries, different language, different culture, going from popular to zero friends, you're the new girl, right? Imagine you're this new girl. And I'm curious because you've done it over and over and over again. It's almost like entering an actress set and being a new actor in a whole different landscape of which a script you're not even clear what that is for you. What what did you learn? Because you're looking back now and you're saying, wow, having done this more than 8 times, I learned to, what would you say those things were that you learned?
Yeah, Analiza, you'll like die if you knew that I actually had different names too. So, yeah, up until the fifth grade, I was Janet, and then I became Victoria when I was in Taiwan. When I came back, I was Catherine. So, literally became a new person because I had the opportunity to. It's not like, I had a legal name, a legal American name in Taiwan. Um, I think like really, really digging deep and thinking through the emotions. I think the initial emotion was just overwhelm, excitement and overwhelm. When you're young, you sort of are like, oh, this is a whole new thing, right? And then you soon start to realize that you have to be extremely observant of the things that are happening around you. Who's talking to who? What are the societal norms? Who do you address? Like, how do you address somebody? Like, do you call them Mr. or Mrs. or do you like how must one speak to your teachers? I remember in school in Taiwan, and by the way, we had a very large class, and believe it or not, I was a number. I had a name, but we were a number. I was number 48. I know this seems so crazy now that I live in New York City. My kids go to, a wonderful independent school in the city to ever consider being a number 48. But I was a new kid, so I was number 48 because I was the 48th kid in the class. And because I was so tall, because I'm about 6 feet tall, I sat way in the back and no one ever saw me. And if I came to class, God forbid, with a pen that didn't have ink in it or something, and the test went on, I couldn't even ask for help. Like it was like you sink or swim. I remember thinking to myself, like, I better learn really, really quickly what it's like to make friends, how to ask for help, because like no one was going to step in and try to help me. Um, that was really, really hard. The interesting thing is it sort of also afforded me a lot of being sort of humble and looking around and understanding what was going on. Shockingly, I was voted class president in the sixth grade and rose to immediate popularity. Everyone wanted to hang out with me, be me. I don't know. I had like a knit sweater that like rose me to like the top of like catapulted me into like this the most extreme of popularity, which is so interesting. They were like, "We love your like knit sweater." It was like it was like an ombre knit sweater. It was so weird. It was just like the littlest things, but people really enjoyed spending time with me, and that was wonderful. And then I came back to America, and I remember till this day, there's a woman, her name was Annie. I won't say her last name, but I'll never forget. She was the only person that came up to me and was like, "Are you having a really good first day in school?" And I remember the only thing that I knew how to say was yeah, because I'd forgotten all my English when I came back to the US in the eighth grade. So I missed 3 years in America when I was in Taiwan. And so, hung out and tried to learn. I think the biggest thing that I realized is in Asian culture, you don't raise your hand ever in class and you don't ever try to speak up in class because you're there to learn and to absorb. In America, you're supposed to raise your hand. If the teacher asks who wants to be the line leader, you go me, 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 me. And that was really difficult for me to understand, like that this is my time to actually be called on. You would never want to be called on in Taiwan. Like you'd be called on if you had like done something horrible and you were going to be shamed. I think there's a lot of like shaming happening in the Asian culture, I'll call it, which is unfortunate. But yeah, and then it was like, the rise to popularity was the right pair of Doc Martens, I swear to God. Um, but yeah, my parents sent me to school the first day of school, with a straw backpack and a giant red coat, and I'll never like forgive my parents for it. I'm like, "Mom, when did you ever think that it was okay to send me to school with a straw backpack?" A straw backpack. But it is what it is. But yeah, resilience, humility, and being just really, really observant of your surroundings is, I think, what I really learned.
I mean, even today, Kathy, in the way that I'm sure if you don't have the Doc Martens and sorry, you've got the cool outfit on again, just threw something on, looks super put together and cute. And so, Kathy, resilience, humility, the ability to be observant. I'm curious, and you brought this up earlier, just Asian culture. There's things that we learn that you're just like, nope, actually, that's not the way I should perform here or operate here or even believe. And so that gives me this question of myths that we have been raised, taught to believe, and then later we find out are not actually true. So,
Mm.
Kathy, can you tell me what myths come to mind when I bring that up for you?
Oh gosh, this is actually quite a personal one. My grandmother was actually the daughter of I'll call it the first wife, which was the unwanted wife. You know, her father actually went on and married two other women, and she was essentially the child of the unwanted um, wife. And so she was actually legitimately put into a garbage can because she was born with severe asthma. And she was raised in secrecy by her own mother. And she only had an education up until the sixth grade. She learned Japanese. This is during the Japanese rule. And she really, you know, through her entire life, like lived with this like real sort of resentment towards, I'll call it, you know, a patriarchal society, and a resentment towards the fact that she wasn't afforded an education, and the fact that, you know, in those times men could have multiple wives just because you were wealthy. And since she was part of the unwanted, you know, she didn't really have any opportunities. And so when she later on married my grandfather, who was just the most wonderful man ever, like just the most happy, encouraging, lovely, wonderful grandfather, she then went on to have four other daughters and then one son. So she had five children of her own. And my mom is actually the first daughter that was born. And so you can imagine how my mother saw the life through my grandmother's lens. You know, we always say, especially in Asian culture, that the stories of your family really are carried through in the women in the family. And you know, you would hear these stories about how my grandmother really, you know, raised my mom to be somebody who, like, the most important thing you can do to get out of poverty is you have to go to school, and you have to not rely on a man, because you know what happens when you rely on a man? You end up like my mom. You end up like having to raise me in secrecy. And so this was like always her idea. Now, on the flip side, you know, in Asian culture, there's this whole dowry concept, right? So if I were to give birth to a daughter, eventually I would take in a dowry from another family and give my daughter away to go live with the husband's side of the family. And so essentially I would lose my daughter. And so this notion of raising women or raising girls is really baked into the Asian culture, at least in Chinese society, Chinese and Taiwanese society, in which, like, when you raise girls, like, you eventually lose them. They're not yours to keep.
Mm.
And so when I was growing up, my mom always reminded me, you know, like that, like this is how she grew up, that there was always this sort of like disparity between, you know, being a boy and being a girl, and being a girl was always just not as favorable. And I always had so much anger around this. I'm like, why would you perpetuate this bias? Like, I don't live like this. You know, I've just the closest relationship with my mom. I see her all the time. I call her all the time. I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, where am I going? Like, who are you giving me away to? I'm coming home. What are you thinking? But you know, to this bias is just so baked into Asian culture, and it's really unfortunate, you know. And again, I think going back to the whole, like, you know, your way out is through education. And so really my options were doctor, lawyer, you know. And of course I went and decided I was going to go be an artist, and that was horrifying to my parents. And not only an artist, but an entrepreneur, which almost is the same thing as being unemployed, which is actually unemployment unless you start making money. Like, when I'm like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, my parents were like, do you mean you don't want to get a job? That's literally what they said. And I'm like, I guess that's another way to think about it. So yeah, I was essentially, you know, on a path to being homeless, and an artistic homeless person. So it was like, you know, pretty horrifying to them. But totally, yeah, you could be successful doing anything you want so long as you love it. I mean, that's the first thing. You have to absolutely love it. And then you have to work super hard at it. And then you're good. Like, and then I think the output of that is money, right? Like, you don't have to worry about like going in optimizing for money first. You optimize for doing what you love and being the best in class in that one thing. So I think that was a myth too.
So the myth of first daughters are meant to be given away, right? That is actually not true. And actually, I know from your website and learning about you, Kathy, that you believe in female empowerment. And so does that stem from there, or would you say there's other pieces to that?
There's so much of it. So, my mom growing up, she was so, so busy. She has three masters. She's absolutely brilliant. She's a limitless learner, absolutely creative and curious, and she's an incredible adult friend. Growing up, she wasn't around a lot. And we talked about this, and she really, according to her mother, had to work really, really hard to learn the language, to get a job, and do all the things. And as a result, kind of really wished when it was my turn that I had the ability to work somewhere and be able to raise my children at the same time. And so, like, how do we create environments in which we can, work, we can raise our children, and we don't have to make a choice? Like, is there a way in which, like, you can have a career, do the things that you love, and not have to make a choice between your family and having a career? I think in the design and creative world is a little bit easier, I'll say, to do that. And that was one of the largest reasons why I started my brand. Is, I was pioneering working from home before working from home was a thing. But, large part of our executive team are actually women. I would say the majority of our team, even outside of our executive team, are also women, and, women of color, women of different, ethnic background. And it's really, really been wonderful. I always say when you get women into a room, it almost seems like nothing is impossible. What can come through, like the amount of problems that we can solve for, and there's just sort of this innate understanding of this is we can all work together and we can build this together. There's egos kind of drip away. There's a lot of humility. It's really remarkable to see what women can do when we put them together in a room, and it's amazing to watch, and it's amazing to build that.
I love that you pioneered, Kathy, before working from home was a thing. You were already doing it, and that you used your mom's, both her inspirational, all that she achieved, but also a way of learning that you wanted something different for you and your kids, and created space literally with your design, your business, to create beautiful space for you, for others, and then also the people who work for you. So I love this through line of both being inspired, but also taking it upon yourself to make things better for women, including yourself. So, love that. And I wanted to go to this idea of you choosing design and entrepreneurship because, frankly, as someone in this entrepreneurship world, you're pretty rare, Kathy, to see a woman of color, Asian woman. It is, as an Asian person myself.
I worked a series of corporate jobs, all in the design field. So I started out actually as a luxury importer. So I designed and understood the entire life cycle of the product, and did a bunch of other corporate jobs. And I remember saying to myself, gosh, all I want to do is just make $5,000 a month, just $5,000 a month. And so that amounted to $60,000 a year, which basically could pay for I think it was like a small one-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side, right? Like 20 years ago. And that was kind of like my goal for myself. So I had to figure out how to get there. How could I make $60,000 a year? It's not great. To support myself. And when I did, I would then quit my corporate job.
Mm.
And mind you, I was making significantly more in corporate, but I was going to, just decide to embark on a Costco ramen diet for the love, and do this. So it wasn't entirely, you know, I was somewhat risk adverse in the beginning because I had to figure out how to live and stuff. But, my parents were supportive over the years, in terms of when I, very early on, they supported me a little bit in some early capital. But for the most part, they were kind of like, you clearly know what you're doing here. You love doing this, and you're so energized by this every day. Um, we went from basically, working out of the basement of my apartment to, 22 people were in the basement of my apartment. I mean, to a point where my super was like, what is happening? The amount of toilet paper we would go through. I mean, it was crazy. So then we actually had to finally move, out of my apartment. But we're about 250 employees now, and it was just like one foot in front of the next. And it's been a crazy, crazy wild ride. I honestly can't think of like one singular moment that I was like, okay, like this is it, right? It was just like, can you do this? Sure, why not? Let's just keep going.
And can you talk about other leadership changes you made as you evolved, especially growing your company from 22 to 250?
I think YPO has been really, really supportive, started extremely helpful for me. We actually implement a lot of what we call the forum toolkits into our business as well. And, we do these level 10 meetings. Our executive meetings are very long, extensive. They happen, on a Tuesday, sometimes 2 to 3 hours at a time. And it's really a shared space in which we really, really work on the business. It's really kind of the only time that we're able to do that. And we always start off with gratitude and vulnerability. And the reason for that is because with shared vulnerability, you are able to really, really hack through a lot of really, really difficult problems that the business may arise. And I will tell you, all of our problems that arise in every business has nothing to do with can we do it? It has more to do with the politics around should I do it? Who am I going to offend? Is this the right step because I might upset this person, or is this my responsibility? It's all politics and silos. And so with shared vulnerability, you're really able to say the things that you mean what you say, have radical candor and really, really push through. I think with being the CEO today, I think the piece that I've worked really, really hard on and learned today is like, you get to a point where you are making decisions. You're making a decision about everything, and you're almost frankly making decisions about things that you shouldn't really be making decisions on. To a point where today, and I would say that the turning point was about maybe a year and a half ago, that I actually am just at a point where all I do is just ask questions. Turning into an active listener, to be an advocate for making the right decisions and teaching the team how to think about a problem as opposed to what to think about. A lot of times, we frankly make decisions that may or may not jeopardize an entire team's efforts that have been, I've experienced this before, where 3 or 4 months of work is like, just because I said one thing, they're halting it and they're moving it in a different direction. And I don't want to be that person. So I want to make sure that we are rowing the boat all collectively in the same direction. We are saying the things that we mean. We were working really, really, really hard to actually have the best in class talent, that we trust each other's judgment, and that we can just move through issues quickly and have a really, really tight feedback loop. But my job is basically to be a sounding board and to be an active listener only. And so I think those are the changes where I am today as a CEO versus where I was before. I don't actually make decisions. It's weird. I don't make decisions. I make decisions by asking you how you should think about it.
I hear you wanting to invest in your people, that they're best in class because you help them really become decision makers themselves. And a lot of that is trying to translate how you think through problems and then also have them think through problems as well, that it's a collaborative effort, really with the foundation of trust.
Yeah.
And that's it's interesting because sometimes people say, well, yes, vulnerability. I mean, we've seen the posters, be vulnerable, share what's in your heart, and that's how you build team morale. But that's not easy. And so, Kathy, like, bring me back if you can to, yes, you had the aha moment. Yes, I want to bring YPO structures, vulnerability into our culture here.
Right. Well, I don't think that it's a hard thing for me. It's natural to me to actually share how I feel. I'm a fairly like, this is how I feel, and I will specifically tell you, when you do this, this makes me feel this way. So this is something that I typically do in general. I think the first step is like, it had to be top down. So the first thing we had to do is we had to make sure that everybody on our leadership team was excellent. That's the first thing, because without that, everything kind of doesn't work, right? You don't trust what they're going to say. You don't really value their judgment. You don't think that they're limitless learners. You're not sure they're totally curious. Like, you have to make sure that they're totally aligned with you and all your values and your culture. The second thing that we did is we would do what we call, they're called like navigating issues, unpacking sessions. And so what we would basically do is we would get into a room and we would talk about one really, really difficult topic. And this difficult topic, we would lead in with sort of, 3 deep breaths, sort of a commitment to be present with each other. And then we go through this exercise of how do we want to roll. And so the how do we want to roll today is basically figuring out, this is the line. We've got to be above the line or below the line. Being above the line is being empathetic, curious, maintaining maintaining a positive outlook, assuming, positive intent. And then below the line, are the opposites of being above the line. And we always say, it's okay to be below the line. We all fall into the trap of being below the line. In fact, we typically go through our day being above the line and below the line, but anytime you're below the line, you're just not above the line. And so if you catch yourself being below the line, that you should call yourself out on it, to be like, you know what, I'm finding myself to be a little bit defensive right now, and I don't know why, and I'm going to just take a minute. And it's okay for other people to call you out on it too, to be like, hey, Analiza, I'm noticing that this is really upsetting you and this is making you feel like I'm getting a sense of defensiveness. Like, can you talk about this some more and where it's coming from? And so really being able to like actually talk about the emotions around the topics that we're talking about, because sometimes that's also really hard too, is what are the emotions surrounding the things that we want and the things that we hope we could do better. But really the big piece is actually owning it 100%, is really going in and say, what is my part in this? Like, if I had the ability to change this one way or another, or if I had the ability to do or say something that actually is, sometimes we act passive, like that's our choice. Our choice is to actually be passive, and that's actually what we're saying, is like we're choosing not to say anything. And sometimes that's actually even more damaging. So, if I had the ability, what is my part? My part is to basically do this. I could be doing this, even if it had nothing to do with me, even if this is completely not my project, and or I don't really think that I have the ability to affect change. If we were to all go in there and like lean in 100%, like everybody on the executive team, let's say it's an issue we want to talk about as it relates to customer service damages, for example. What can I do in ops? What can I do in service? What can I do in trade? What can I do in all these different departments? And actually write it down. The nuggets of wisdom that come out of really owning something 100% is so remarkable. And the minute you hear somebody else own their stuff, it's so like compelling, because you're like, wait, you totally did not need to own that. And thank you for owning that, because now that I realize that you wish that you could have spoken up when this had happened, I feel like now I can own it. It's almost like we help each other get better by owning it, even if we don't have to. And I think that's also part of relationships too, where it's like, it's not enough to just lean in 50%. You have to lean in like 80%, because if I know, no matter what, you've leaned in 80%, because you're going to catch me every time I fall, because you are there for me 80% of the time, it no longer becomes a transactional relationship, right? It's like, I always know you are going to come to me before I need it. And so having that with your leadership team is so important when you unpack issues. And I think that helps when you have shared vulnerability. When you say, I know I'm acting this way, call me out on it. When I act this way, call me out on it, because I'm going to be better. I promise you, I will be better, and I will thank you when you call me out on this.
Wow. Kathy, this vulnerability that underscores your way of operating with your team, I want to just spell those out the way that I heard them was: one, make sure the team's awesome, excellent, values aligned, top notch. So you got that in place where you can truly believe that they're going to do a great job, and they're going to learn, and they're going to be there. So that's the first thing. The second thing I heard was, where are we? Having this above the line, below the line structure, and being able to have that common knowledge, common language, so that we could name it, not just for each other, but also particularly important for ourselves. So I'm hearing that. The third is that we're fully in 100% for each other, and 100% to name what can I do, even if a problem doesn't seem to touch my realm at all, but there is a piece that I can own. What is that 100%? So I love that foundation. So Kathy, this goes beyond just your executive team. Like, the teams practice that within each other's teams. Is that right?
Right. So we actually have what we'll call like L10 meetings in all the departments as well. And so last year we rolled it out to our three biggest, and this year we're going to roll it out to ops and finance. So it's not on all teams, but it's such a process. You have to really follow the process, because we go through a whole scorecard review. We then go through a rock review, quarterly rocks, and then so it's like once you actually go through the process, it's fairly extensive, but then everybody's on a single roadmap. You literally see what everybody else is doing. And so it's like, it's crystal clear. It's not like, oh, I think I know, because every week we talk about the same things, and it's, listed out onto a scorecard. so that everybody can see.
Beautiful. And I love how you connect business objectives with like the touchy feely stuff, which actually is real, right? We often are like feelings, feelings, whatever, we'll deal with that later. But actually, that does drive so much of what's happening.
I can't even tell you, it's been so impactful to the men on our leadership team. They have expressed to me, I mean, I've witnessed tears. I've expressed like, wow, I feel more connected to this. I'm going to take some of these learnings and bring it even to my own family and how I communicate with my wife and children. It's amazing.
Mm.
The things that I'm hearing. The men are very appreciative because I don't think that they um, are taught really to, go through an emotions-based update as opposed to, well, how's your day? It was good. Michigan won. Great. Awesome. What else?
Beautiful. So I want to bring us, Kathy, to your children
Mm.
and just how you have, done this business while also being a single mom. And I want to just highlight, like, how do you do it? If you're just like, I know you do so much and there's so many best practices and you're such a learner that there are different, pieces that you've brought together from different sources. But if you just highlight maybe a couple that you're just like, hey, I know I'm busy. I really want to be a present mom. Here are two things that I do and I make sure I do. I'm really committed to help me be the best mom and also the best leader I can be. Can you share?
Yeah, for sure. By the way, I need like all the tips in the world, so I can dish out too, but like I like please help me out here. I live and die by my schedule, and I know it sounds neurotic, but I actually schedule in what we call special time with my kids. So I have a 6 and now close in a few days 7-year old, a 7 and 10-year old. Special time is so critical. Now it's only 30 minutes, and every kid gets special time with me for 30 minutes allotment. And they know it's scheduled and they know it's coming and they all fight for it. They're like, can I get special time today? They like think all day about like what they want to do in their special time. And the 30-minute special time is honestly whatever they want to do. Like honestly, whatever, like granted it can't be like something dangerous or like we have to be able to do it within 30 minutes, right? And so some of the times, because you have two kids, like, oftentimes it's sort of like they're always just fighting for each other's attention for my attention. Like they just want one-on-one time. Sometimes Maya will want, to just literally go to Duane Reade and get a bag of Doritos. Like she just cherishes just walking that 2.5 blocks to go get Doritos, for me to pay for it, of course, and then for me to walk back with her and like the conversations we'll have. And so what happens is when the other kid gets special time, the other kid has to get into their PJs or get ready for bed or whatever it may be. But during the special time, what I really make a note to do is actually all I do is reflect back and ask questions. So there's no moment of judgment. The 30 minutes is a judgment free zone for me. So my daughter will say things to me like blah, 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 this kid, that kid, school, da, 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 da. And as much as I want to be like, who said what to you? I try so hard to not react. And I just ask her, like, well, how do you feel about that? Would you like my help or do you want to talk about it some more tomorrow? And so I literally will just re-ask her the same questions back. So she'll be like, what I really think about blah, 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 blah in science class today, and I'll literally just repeat it back to her. So it's like, okay, so in science class today, you did blah, 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 and you had a fight with blah, 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 because you didn't agree with the wind and science and water project, right? And she'd be like, yeah. And then that just gets her talking. And the reflecting back has been so amazing because she's like, wow, you're so present with me. And it feels super weird because you're like repeating back what they're saying to you. And you don't judge, you just like kind of stand around and you're there. But that's been the most impactful thing. They love their special time.
Oh my gosh, Kathy, do you do that every day?
Well, since I only get them 50% of the time,
Hmm.
only the days that I get them. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is beautiful. I want to do that.
That's
Oh,
what we're
okay.
doing.
It's
And
so
I
good.
mean,
Let us go to lightning round. Are you
yeah.
ready?
Mhm.
Okay, here we go. Chocolate or vanilla?
Probably vanilla.
Vanilla.
Yeah.
Cooking or takeout?
Cooking.
Would you rather climb a mountain or jump from a plane?
God, definitely climb a mountain. Does anybody say jump from a plane? Probably.
Have you ever worn socks with sandals?
Nope. I'm not going to adopt my daughter's fashion faux pas. That's what she does.
How would you rate your karaoke skills? Scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Mariah Carey.
I'm like barely allowed to sing at a bar mitzvah. You don't want me singing. No.
What's a recent book you read?
Got a bunch on rotation, but I recently read with Maya it's like a comic book version of Sapiens, which is wonderful. It's a really thick book, but they have a like a comic book version. Yeah, it's fun.
Sapiens, comic book. Okay, sweet. What's your favorite way to practice self care?
I do sound meditation. I have a dance instructor that comes every Tuesday, and we do TikTok dances. I know it sounds so ridiculous. I do it primarily to just like embarrass my kids, but we pick a song and we work through it, and I get a great cardio out of it. Yes, and then we record it, and it never gets posted, but I show my kids.
That's
And they're so
awesome.
embarrassed. It's so cringy. They're like, never. Like, literally, my almost is like, I don't even want to be around when my dance instructor is there because she's like, it's so cringy. But
Wow.
I get
I
great
love it.
cardio.
I love it. Okay. What's a good professional development you've done?
Recently, I would probably say, honestly, just being enrolled in my PO and attending some of the, like the large form trainings.
Great. What's your definition of a boss mama?
Boss mama. God, hopefully you wake up and you're happy, Let's just start there, wake up happy, have no anxiety, and yeah.
Great. What advice would you give your younger self, Kathy?
Life is almost very rarely how you plan it, it's very rarely a linear path. Um, and so long as you can sort of be open-minded and resilient to it, you're going to be okay. But yeah, it's okay to not be in a linear path.
And where can we find you besides your website or LinkedIn, anywhere like that?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Kathy Kuo, Kuo. We're all over social media, Instagram for sure, Pinterest as well. We pin every single day, every 15 minutes. I swear to God, there's a pinning lady that pins every 15 minutes. It's amazing stuff we create. We're on LinkedIn and certainly on our website, and you can certainly also do interior design services with us too at Kathy Kuo Home.
And last question, final ask, recommendation, or any parting thoughts to share?
I'm so excited for honestly where you're going with, your career. I'm really excited to see that there's more support given to Asian Americans. And I'm just really happy that there is just sort of this this place now that we can all talk about sort of how our culture affects us. And so thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kathy.